I'm always interested to see where sci-fi takes us. Sci-fi is one of those genres that takes what's happening in the world today, but puts it through a fantastical lens, and I think sometimes that can make our own lives clearer.
I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocooncast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be doing a midweek movie review of the new movie, The Shift.
Midweek movies are a great time to take a chance on a movie you might not otherwise see. Check out your local movie theater for midweek bargain days. Some have movie clubs where you get special pricing. Maybe take your partner on a date. If you're burned out on the 3-hour blockbusters, this is a great time to take a chance on a movie and see a smaller budget movie. Rebecca, tell us about The Shift.
Kevin Garner has a beautiful life with a wife and a son that he adores, but all of that is ripped away with one car accident. When the mysterious benefactor offers him the chance to get it all back, but at the cost of his complete freedom, Kevin must decide. Are his needs the freedom his life is built upon, or is there something greater to find?
Rebecca, you're excited to see this movie. It was sci-fi thriller, your kind of movie.
Totally my kind of movie.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of faith-based films recently that show that the genre isn't just biographies of revered holy people.
That is correct. There are some really great faith-based movies. We saw Journey to Bethlehem recently.
I did enjoy that one a lot.
I agreed with that one. We had also seen The Blind.
That's correct. We saw that as well.
But this one was a bit different for you because I know for me, sci-fi thrillers, not typically my genre. But obviously for you, it is more so. I saw the trailers and actually I was pulled in by the trailers. The actors that were in there, a few of them I knew, a few of them I didn't know, but it looked interesting to me.
The idea sounded interesting. It kind of reminded me of Sliders, but with a more personalized touch. You're focusing on one protagonist purely.
What's interesting to me is we're talking about the genre, right? The sci-fi thriller, but also with the overlay of the faith piece. There are not, to my knowledge, too many faith-based sci-fi movies to actually not necessarily compare, but to contrast and say, hey, this one went ahead of you and they've done a really good job at this. This feels like a new space for me.
I agree with you. I think that there's definitely more sci-fi faith-based literature.
Very much. That's true.
I grew up with specifically Brian Davis's Dragons in Our Midst, both trilogies, both quadrilogies, yeah.
Okay, and correct. And so that's the other part that I'm struggling with because I'm like,
You feel like it already exists, but it's not there.
But it's not there. And you were saying the idea. So let's talk about the screenplay a little bit.
One of the things I did like about the screenplay is it was actively trying to give Kevin, our protagonist, a purpose. And I thought that was kind of cool because in these films, you often have the protagonist actively meandering. They went straight to the point. I thought that was really smart because it gets the audience invested.
I agree with that. I like that when they set it up that quickly versus you're kind of lost, you're kind of over here, you're over here. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we need to pay attention. It's out of the gate. And to me, that increases my investment in the characters and in the story.
It also took the chance to have the character live with their choices. There's several key moments in The Shift where Kevin can't think his way out of it. There's also some puzzles that he kind of had to solve, and we as an audience were hooked along with him thinking, how's he going to get out of this?
Correct. And we did not know. And the options he had at that point were not positive. I did like the realistic part, meaning, as he's meeting Molly, who I'm trying not to spoil too much, but as he's meeting this woman that he's interested in, losing his job, he has a challenge with alcohol, which isn't overly graphic, but communicates the point of where he is in his life, and he even having conversation with her. So I think the screenplay did a good job at that. I honestly, there were parts in the middle that were interesting, but felt underdeveloped, I think.
I think some of it was a little heavy-handed in what it was trying to say, and unfortunately, that would telegraph parts of the plot to me later.
And you would have wanted those sooner, correct?
No, I would have liked a little bit more suspense in the screenplay.
Oh, okay. No, that makes sense to me.
If you're in a world where you can't trust anyone, hold that tension out a little longer. Build up on it organically.
Yeah, I like the screenplay reasonably well. I think I liked it a little bit more than you. I know the beginning I liked a lot, and the ending I liked a lot.
I thought the ending was interesting because it wasn't cookie cutter, everybody lives, so to speak.
Correct.
I like how they set up. They let it unwind, so to speak.
Correct. And there was a few callbacks, which I think enriched that versus, and I know we had talked about it previously, where some movies are, oh my gosh, we just need to end this movie. And they just throw whatever they can at it to go, oh, see, we ended it.
There was a couple points, however, during the ending process where I'm like, you could have just ended here. It would have been fine. And then maybe you could have expanded on that story in a sequel.
Oh, that would have been interesting. Almost like a book series, only it's a movie series.
I think this story would have worked better as a book series first, and then developed as a movie. There's something missing to me, and I can't tell if it's just because I've spent so much time in this space that I start to notice all these little things that I like in my stories.
But you're the person who would communicate that better than I would, because like you said, you know the sci-fi space so much better than I do. In my mind, you're the expert in that. And honestly, we see a lot of faith-based movies in addition to a lot of the blockbusters, a lot of the indies. Plus, you're so well read. I would think you would be the perfect person to be able to put all of those together.
I think I know what it was. I think it felt like every time, with the exception of two scenes,
sure,
that the filmmakers were afraid to have Kevin make a complete choice.
Oh, that's an interesting piece.
It felt like you were always giving him an out. And I don't know if that was by design or to create a more sympathetic character. Because you have Kevin wrestling with these alternate versions of himself.
Correct.
And you need it was the same complaint I had with Lady Bird a few weeks ago.
Oh.
Somebody needs to be the bad guy. Somebody needs to be the good guy. And I think, especially with the issues that Kevin is wrestling with, I think, no pun intended, shades of gray need to be demonstrated for these characters, because then you start to see this collapse that Kevin is living through.
I'm laughing, the shades of gray, because
the Jars of Clay reference.
The Jars of Clay, the lead singer of Jars of Clay.
They even have a Jars of Clay song.
Yes.
There's a throwback.
I know, back in the day. But it's interesting to me because there's that whole spiritual piece where it is black, it's white, it's good, it's not so good. And I think truly there are some things that are very black and white in our world, but there are some areas that are gray. And as you said, there is a tension quality that would have built up because this is a thriller also, correct? It's not just sci-fi.
That's true. And sci-fi mirrors our world.
Yes, very much.
It's often a lens that people can use to pull things out of our world, present them in another format, and it makes it easier for the audience to comprehend where somebody's coming through.
Yes.
I can't think of a better example than, say, Twilight Zone or Star Trek.
Sure.
The original Star Trek specifically.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
And also even some of the modern ones. For our Trekkie fans who are watching, there's actually a Star Trek cameo. Pay attention.
Oh, wow. Well, and the screenplay is based, I think, loosely. There's some scripture from the book of Job. And it felt like there were some callbacks to that, and there was a certain element to that.
I like the idea of taking a familiar reference in the faith-based community and reinterpreting it through a genre lens. At the same time, it felt a bit heavy-handed.
And it didn't need to be.
That's correct. I think this material needs room to breathe because there are actors in this film that can make the material breathe. Your audience will definitely get more out of it if you let them sit with it, not that you're whack-a-moling them with scripture constantly.
And it doesn't honestly overly identify with scripture. If you don't know the scripture, you're not going to necessarily know that it's scripture. I think only there's one reference at the end, which is Job. Although scripture is, sort of sets the stage between the different scenes. But you were talking about the casting a bit.
There's two characters that are designed to have chemistry in these movies.
Correct. Well, multiple, actually, even friction. So there is chemistry in my mind. It's not just, the love connection.
I felt like I got more out of Journey with Bethlehem, and they had immediate friction as well. In their opening sequence, they had immediate friction, and I could see how they could connect, but also pull away. This just felt like a bad improv skit. Come here, go away. Come here, go away.
Oh, okay. Honestly, I felt the actors in of themselves were good. There were some scenes that were compelling between the benefactor and Kevin, the main character, that were intriguing and well written and well acted in my mind. I don't know if it was the benefactor didn't quite feel as menacing with Kevin, or I don't know. It felt a little off a bit.
The word I would use to describe some of the acting choices is campy. Some of it is overblown to the point of parody, and it feels like they're just kind of chewing the scenery at that point. I do like the fact that he's the devil and the devil is bad. Woo!
You are the devil and the devil is bad.
Yeah, right. And then the W song comes in to instead of the jars of clay. That was their first option. But I agree with that. I think that there were some parts where the chemistry was lacking. It's just interesting in terms of, would you say if you don't have a faith-based piece or are not interested in seeing a movie with the faith-based undertone, do you think it's overly religious even? I mean, do you think it's a story that can be told without that piece?
I think it's a story that can be told. There's always tales of people resisting thoughts that are contrary to who they are.
Sure.
Whether you're in the faith-based space or not. I think they should have worked backwards. It felt like they read the book of Job and go, how can I do this? Not, here's a story. How can I weave this in?
Well, and Job's a long book. So there are many different elements, I think, that could be drawn from that. I think the part that disappointed me, because I liked the actors that were in the movie. For example, in the acting, Sean Astin played, right, our buddy Rudy, who's, he's played in Lord of the Rings. He's been in so many pieces that we love. He felt underutilized to me. I'm like, wow, he's in this. This will, I mean, in of itself, I'm like, it looks like a good movie. But when he was in, I'm like, ooh, who will he play? What will he do?
I know for you and I, we were discussing on the way back to the studio. I mentioned that Sean had played a bit part in a show of a series that we like, The Librarians.
Oh, sure, right.
I feel like he was more compelling in that. In the space of 45 minutes, I was able to feel more of an emotional resonance with his character arc than in this film.
I was disappointed.
He was well cast, but please, if you got talent, don't be afraid to use it.
I was disappointed. It felt like he was kind of standing around for a lot of the movie. And as you said, he had an integral part. And somehow it just didn't quite connect. One part that did connect for me were the effects and the cinematography. I actually enjoyed the effects, and obviously we're talking about switching, so he's disappearing at different points. I thought that was actually pretty seamless at different points.
I was kind of bored by the cinematography. It felt very flat to me, and not because they're using desaturated colors. It just felt like, what are we going to do to communicate this idea? Okay, now we've done it.
Wow. And it's always tricky to me because their budget was, what, $6 million, 6.3. Very, very low budget.
If you want to see a high concept take on something like shifting, I would recommend Looper. I feel like Looper is a better example of a character that's trying to find themselves, but also struggling with who they are.
I will say I'm excited that this movie is getting airplay.
I'm excited it exists too.
And AMC is plugging this movie. I know Cinemark is plugging this movie. More showtimes are being added. And I know earlier this year, Sound of Freedom really took off. I mean, huge. I don't know if this movie is going to take off quite as much. However, I'm excited that quality movies are being made. Is there room for improvement? That's what we discuss. But yeah, I enjoyed it for what it was.
I think The Shift has a unique opportunity. It is a faith-based movie, but it's also a sci-fi movie, and sci-fi fans are more than likely willing to take a chance on genre program that they think might offer them an interesting idea.
Do we have any questions from the box?
Having seen lots of faith-based movies over the years, lots of times they're a little bit more sanitized. The endings are lots of times Hallmark kind of endings. This movie is shot in a gritty manner. It's kind of some underworld scenes and some dark places. And then the ending is I think a good ending, but not your typical ending. Do you think the faith-based community is going to be able to enjoy this and grab a hold of it?
I think a lot of people in my generation and the generation afterwards are sick of the sanitized Hallmark stuff. I think that this has the potential to meet people where they're at in certain ways. Our opening scene, the main character is in a bar, kind of playing with his sobriety chip. That right there tells you that there is going to be some realism with this movie. The ending, it is not completely fluffy unicorns and rainbows. There is some grittiness. There is some time to grow and build that relationship again. I think that's important. And I think more filmmakers need to embrace the fact that audiences don't want this kind of magical fairy tale when they go to the movies. There is an audience for that, but I think they will get a greater response and resonance from their audience if they meet their audience where they're at.
I also agree with that. I think the director who also wrote the movie believes that to be true. Otherwise, he wouldn't invest his time and bring people on board. I agree. I think the Hallmark type movie, I know we keep saying the Hallmark type movie, but the fluffy unicorns and, kitty movies, for some people, that is a great movie. They love movies like that, the predictability, the sanitized version.
That's not my kind of movie.
Well,
not always.
Exactly. And sometimes those are the movies to see. And for someone, if that's what they're most comfortable with, I would say they probably wouldn't enjoy the movie. And as you're talking about people of your generation, right, late 20s and things like that, they would, I agree, I think they would resonate with it. The part that I love is when faith can extend beyond what people know and believe to people that don't yet believe or don't yet know, in a way that's reality, because faith informs. And people of faith, what did they say, right? It changes their life. It informs them. It's relevant. And to me, this movie is very relevant to all people.
And that's what I love about science fiction. Science fiction also has the unique capacity to meet people where they're at. It's almost disarming in a way. If you take a story about two aliens not getting along,
sure,
but then one alien falls for another alien, you start to realize how silly it is in our world that we put these barriers between our lives. It's interesting to me.
It is interesting. I agree with that. And I would say there is a place for that. It's interesting to put faith-based and sci-fi together and say, hey, this can be a great movie. But I would say out of the gate, this is worth a watch. Let's do our moth rating, though. 1 to 5 moths. Rebecca, what do you think? How would you rate this movie?
Well, I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to give this a 2 moth movie.
Oh, wow. Below average.
I feel like the pedigree of the creative team could have lent themselves to a better movie. There are several ideas that I've seen better in series like Sliders, movies like Looper. There is one thing that the filmmakers did that did not sit well with me. I love the fact that a lot of filmgoers are encouraged to help other people see the movie. I don't think that's cheating. Group ticket sales have been around for a long time. Here's where I got mad. At the end of almost every Angel Studios production that we've seen, there's a QR code encouraging people to buy tickets and share the experience with other folks.
Sure, agreed.
This movie specifically said, if you donate, you unlock a scene that's supposed to change the movie. Have the guts to have your creative work stand on its own and then let the people respond to it.
That makes sense why you would lower your rating. I would say it's a 2 and a wing for me. I actually was thinking about a 3, but I think 2 and a wing communicates what we've talked about, which is a great beginning, a good ending that I liked, good acting. The screenplay at parts were really good. It wasn't poorly acted. But if we were to compare it to other movies, I think it's average. Does it have room to grow? Could it be, as you were saying, multiple movies or multiple books? I think it could, but it's moving in that direction. And I think within this genre, whether it's a sci-fi thriller or even a faith-based movie, I would say it probably would get higher marks for a faith-based movie, but lower marks for a sci-fi movie, meaning about average for a sci-fi.
That's where I'm at. I am constantly bombarded with different landscapes of film.
Sure.
So when you have something that's going to overlap in genre, I have no choice as a modern audience goer to compare it to those films.
Well, especially because, as we said, there are not that we're aware of, and I would love to hear from our cinema community if they can think of some sci-fi faith-based movies that maybe we've missed, because we obviously, like as you said, we can't see them all, that they've loved and maybe that they would compare that to or offer some feedback around. But based on where I sit, I would just say, yes, as a faith-based movie, it's great to see the faith-based movies being elevated and taken seriously, getting budgets, and as you said, paying it forward so more people can see them. I love that aspect. But I have to be fair and say, hey, this is a sci-fi. This is what you're putting it out as. And it doesn't hit the mark as high for me.
I think that's the rough part, is we live in a very prominent movie market.
That is
so
correct.
We are even more exposed to these types of films.
Correct. And we may be more critical.
I believe that's the case. We're definitely more critical than most folks.
I would think so too. Thanks for joining us for this midweek review. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Come back to the channel this weekend for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark, meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this midweek review, you might click the link to check out our review of Godzilla -1, or click the other link to watch last week's show where we reviewed Renaissance, a film by Beyonce.
Remember, cinema community movies are better together. Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.